Hey, y'all.
Welcome back to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late. It is I, Andrea, and it's not super late right now. We are pre-recording. Again, once baseball season is over, I will be back live with you guys, but I will be in the chats tonight. So if you guys are watching along, I will be able to kind of converse with you about the case that we are covering. If you're a new listener, this is a true crime podcast. And keep that in mind for anybody who might be listening along with you. But otherwise, we do air live every Tuesday on YouTube at 8, 7 Central on the Andrea, what is it called? It's called the Andrea Up Late channel on YouTube. Also on Instagram, you can follow me at the same handle. So welcome back, guys. It's a whole new week. We got another show for you. This one's a doozy. Actually, one of our listeners, Imperial Girl, brought this case up last week. It's not a new case, but there have been somewhat some new development. So we're going to talk about it. I appreciate her sending that. You guys can always send me case ideas. I do my best to go through them and here and there grab one when the mood strikes. So we are covering the case tonight of Ellen Greenberg. It's a case that happened out in Philadelphia back in 2011. So we're going to cover that. But before I do, it's likely going to be at least a two-parter. I think if you didn't get a chance to, you should go back and listen to the Hendricks family axe murders. That wound up being a two-parter. And the first show, I just kind of broke down the case. And then the second show, I brought in a retired homicide lieutenant to talk about that case and kind of see if what was unsolved might actually have been solved at the time. So I think we're going to do kind of a similar thing this week. And this isn't like a solved or unsolved. This is just an interesting idea on what happened to this young woman. And so tonight I'm going to break down the case for you. And next week we are going to talk about maybe what this really looks like and if we agree with what the medical examiner has come to say is the actual maybe reason behind her death, even though we know that it is not their job necessarily to give a reason behind the death. So let's get to it, guys. All right. We're going to talk about Ellen Ray Greenberg. Ellen was born on June 23rd of 1983. She at the time was a 27-year-old first grade teacher in Philadelphia there at the Juniata, I believe that's how you pronounce it, Juniata Park Academy in Juniata, Philadelphia. In 2011, she was living in the Venice Loft apartment complex building. This is a pretty nice building, guys. They had nice facilities there, and we will definitely be talking about that here momentarily. And she was living there with her fiance, Sam Goldberg. All right, he was a TV producer. So they'd been in this relationship for a few years. They had recently gotten engaged. All right. So on January 26th of 2011, a blizzard was impending and Ellen was sent home from school that day. All right. So she was actually pretty happy. We know that she texted with her mom some that afternoon. And, she was excited to be able to, as we all are, leave work a little bit early and go home. So she was going to go home and kind of settle in to her apartment and kind of await the storm. So at 2:30, remember, guys, we always talk timelines when applicable, and in this case, it certainly is. At 2:30 p.m. that day, Ellen called the Vetri restaurant. We don't have any indication of if she was calling to cancel a reservation, make a reservation, order takeout. There's really no records of that, but we do know that she made the phone call to the restaurant. Excuse me. So she calls them. She also sends a text at 3:47 p.m. So this is about the last outside communication that we have record of from Ellen. Her computer shows activity at 4:46 p.m. that day. So Sam is home at this point with her, and he decides to go to the gym. So they lived on the third floor apartment. Their apartment was there on the third floor. The gym facility was down on the first floor. So while this was an apartment complex, some of the recordings I've seen of like the internal security footage and whatnot kind of reads like a hotel almost. So some of the hallways appear that way. So he was going to go down to the first floor gym and work out for a bit. So he heads down there and leaves their residence, and we have footage of him at 4:50 p.m. entering that first floor gym. All right. So the next activity that we have is footage showing Sam exiting that gym, and this was at 5:26. So that would have been 36 minutes of gym time. You know, there's been some pushback on that here and there, and people speculating that, that's not long enough and it doesn't make sense. He was only there for half an hour. Sure, it can. Maybe he wasn't feeling it that day. Maybe he had to go to the bathroom. Maybe he just did a quick, I don't know, chest and back workout. I don't know, and popped on back upstairs. Either way, he leaves there at 5:26 p.m. Around 5:30, he gets back to his apartment door and tries to enter the apartment. All right. So they have what's called the swing bar lock. I actually have a picture here I'll show you. For you guys that are listening, I do try to throw up some pictures for the YouTube channel here and there, so you can always check that out. So if you're listening, I'm describing what is called the swing bar lock. You've likely seen something like this before. It's going to be in a lot of your hotel doors. It's going to have the silver or the hardware that goes on the door itself, and then the other hardware that goes on the door frame, and it's a open-ended bar that swings over and locks that way. So this is the kind that would allow you to open the door from the exterior about 3 inches or so, but not fully. So that's what they had there. So as Sam tries to open that door, he realizes that Ellen is not only not coming to the door, but she's not answering his calls as he starts to kind of call her name and try to force the door open. So the lock had appeared to be engaged from inside the residence. So he continues to kind of push. He's starting to shout Ellen's name. He calls her on her phone twice. She doesn't answer. So he starts sending her text messages. All right. So I'm going to read these to you. He says, hello. That was his first text message. Now, of course, keep in mind, he's not getting any response. So all of these are going to be from Sam to Ellen at this time. So he says, hello. Then he texts, open the door. And then, what are you doing? And then, I'm getting pissed. Hello. You better have an excuse. We'll talk about that. What the F? And then he just says, like AHHH. And then he said, you have no idea. So I will tell you that you better have an excuse is, I don't know. I don't like the way that sounds. I feel like I've listened to multiple podcasts and read multiple articles on this one. And, there's a lot of similar speculation in that, if I'm worried or concerned, or maybe let's say I am irritated. Let's say you knew I was going to the gym and I'm not going to be there that long. And I come back and you're not answering the door for me. Okay, maybe I'm irritated, but when you continue to not answer the door, now I'm probably going to be getting more concerned, more worried. So his, text thread is obviously kind of escalating in irritation at the very least, I would say. So these are the texts that Sam sent her at the time. So like I said, clearly he's getting no response. So he leaves the door there and goes down to the lobby. There he finds the security guard of the apartment complex, and he requests that the security guard accompany him back to his apartment to help him bust down the door or get into there somehow. The guy says, no, that's against apartment policy. You can imagine he's not allowed to just go bust down anyone's door, even if they live there. I would assume there's a lot more rules engaged there. So he says no. Sam kind of goes back and forth from the lobby to his apartment door. And finally, he realizes that the guard is going to continue to refuse. So Sam says that he kicks the door in. We will talk about what that looks like, meaning physically what the door looked like after Sam states he kicks it in. But when he does, he finds Ellen lying. The kitchen is kind of what the door opens up to when you first go into the apartment. And he sees Ellen, he tells authorities, slumped on the kitchen floor, kind of against the cabinets, legs spread out in front of her, arms down by her side, head kind of bowed over her chest. And there's a little bit of blood around her. Okay. So Sam then calls 911, and at this time it's 6:31 p.m. Okay. So he left the gym at 5:26, and the time it took for all of this to ensue, it's just over an hour later. It's 6:31 p.m. But at 6:34 p.m., 3 minutes later, his cousin, Kamian Schwartzman, that's Kamian Schwartzman, Sam's cousin, gets to the apartment. So when the first responders actually get there and arrive to find Ellen, cousin Kamian is already there with Sam. Okay. So it's unclear when. There are different reports, so I don't really want to speculate on it. But at some point during all of this, Kamian's father, who is Sam's uncle, James Schwartzman, appears at the residence as well. So now we have Sam, his cousin, and his uncle, who are just kind of all there as first responders, are getting there to check out Ellen. So we know that he, meaning Sam, at some point that night is accompanied by police in handcuffs to the station to answer some questions. And he also has his lawyer present. So let's go on and listen to these 911 calls. I think that, we talk often about, it's one thing for me to read to you what someone says. It's entirely different to hear someone say what they're saying. So let's go on and take a listen to those. When he first calls.
I just walked into my apartment. My fiance's on the floor with blood everywhere.
What is the address?
4601 Flat Rock Road. Please come help now.
4601
Flat Rock Road.
Is it the house or apartment?
Oh no! Oh no! It's an apartment.
What apartment number?
Please hurry, please.
Where is she bleeding from?
I don't know. I can't tell.
No. So you have to calm yourself down in order to get you some help.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm looking at her right now.
Okay. So in that first call, he says that her face is a little purple. So keep that in mind, because it's going to be a little important later when we find out what he doesn't seem to notice. But he does seem to notice that her face is a little purple. All right. So let's go on and see what else he has to say.
I need you to calm down, and I need you to look at her chest. It's really.
I really don't think she is.
Listen to me. Someone's on the way. Look at her chest. Is she flat on her back?
She's on her back. So I bring her.
Look at her chest and tell me if it's going up and down, up and down.
I don't see her.
Look at her chest. I need you to calm down, and I need you to look at her chest. It's really.
I really don't think she is.
Listen to me. Someone's on the way. Look at her chest. Is she flat on her back?
She's on her back. So I bring her.
Look at her chest and tell me if it's going up and down, up and down.
I don't see her.
Look at her chest. I need you to calm down, and I need you to look at her chest. It's really.
I really don't think she is.
Okay, that one played long, but that's where he says that she's flat on her back. So keep that in mind. He's going to say she's flat on her back. She's flat on her back. And then it sounds like it gets cut off when he's saying, should I? And it sounds like bring her up. Should I bring her up? So then we have, let's see here. We have this little clip here.
I want you to keep her flat on her.
God.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, okay.
Willing to do CPR with me over the phone so they can.
I have to, right?
Okay, so get her flat on her back, bare her chest. Okay, you want to rip her shirt off. Okay, they get there. I want you to keep her flat on her.
God.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, okay.
Willing to do CPR with me over the phone so they can.
I have to, right?
Okay, so get her flat on her back, bare her chest. Okay, you want to rip her.
Okay. Did you catch that? He says, I have to, right? She says, are you willing to perform CPR? And he says, I have to, right? All right. We're not done with these. Let's keep on listening. It only gets better.
Won't come off. It's a zipper. Oh, my God. She stabbed herself.
Where?
She fell with a knife. Oh, no. Her knife's sticking out.
What?
There's a knife sticking out of her heart.
Oh, she stabbed herself?
I guess so. I don't know where she fell on it. I don't know.
Okay, well, don't touch it.
Okay, so I just let her down. Here now. I mean, what do I do? Oh, with a knife. Oh, no. Her knife's sticking out.
What?
There's a knife now.
01
Flat Rock Road.
Is this a house or apartment?
Oh no. It won't come off. It's a zipper. Oh my God. She stabbed herself.
Where?
Okay, so his surprise at finding the knife. What do you guys think? Let me know in the chats, because to me, there's such a lilt in his voice when he says, "Oh, there's a knife," that, you know, if she's found the way he tells authorities later that she was found, meaning slumped over against the cabinets, her back against the kitchen cabinets on the floor, if she's leaned over, then I can imagine that he may not see the knife initially when he first stumbles upon. But he tells the 911 dispatcher that she's in fact lying flat on her back. She multiple times asks him that, and every single time he replies that yes, she is, to the point that he is, in theory, about to provide CPR. So if what he's saying is true, this woman is lying on her back. He attempts to unzip or remove her shirt, and not until then does he see the handle of a steak knife sticking out of her. Her shirt was stabbed through, meaning the knife was outside of all of her clothing. It wasn't hidden under a coat or anything like that. So if she was lying on her back, like he states, this knife handle was out the whole time. Okay. So let's go on. We're going to play just a couple more clips and then we'll go on with the story.
77.
Is someone coming here?
Yes, they are. You said 4601 Flat Rock, right?
Yes.
Okay, someone's on the way. And the knife is still inside?
Wait, sir, what?
The knife is still inside of her?
Yes, I didn't take it out.
Was it her chest or what area did
It's
it?
in her chest. It's like, it looks like it's...
277.
Is someone coming here?
Yes, they are. You said 4601 Flat Rock, right?
Yes.
Okay. What do we always say? We try not to speculate too much during a traumatic event, meaning when someone has called 911, maybe even their initial engagement with authorities on scene. You know, everyone responds to trauma and to shock differently, and their voices can do funny things. I, for one, this isn't even traumatic, but I cannot help myself. I'm going to probably laugh if you fall. I can say that because I don't feel bad, only because I trip and stumble a lot because I'm really clumsy. So I don't feel so bad about it. But if someone is tripping or falling, I'm probably going to laugh, meaning people do things that they don't mean in the moment, meaning I don't necessarily think, you know, I want to know someone's okay, but also that's just my instinct. But in this 911 call, when she asks if the knife is still present, does she still have the knife in her? And he has that strange chuckle when he says, the knife? And he was like, yeah, I didn't take it out. So we'll play one more little clip. And this is also pretty interesting to me.
It looks like it's right in her heart.
Okay, someone's on the way out there. Okay, just get.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay,
How old is
thank you.
she?
She's 27.
27. And there's no sign of life at all? Like, been turned to her arm.
No, please don't be. What?
Been turned to her arm and tell me if she responds to pain.
She's Ellie. She's not. Her arm, her hands are still warm. I don't know if that means, but there's blood everywhere. I mean,
I know, but you can't.
it looks like it's right in her heart.
Okay, someone's on the way out there. Okay, just get.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
How old
Okay.
is she?
She's 27.
All right. So did you catch that? She says, where is the knife? And he says, it's like right there. It's right in her heart. I find that very interesting because he could have said in her chest. He's in duress right now, in theory, right? He's stumbled upon this scene of his girlfriend with a knife in her. He's being asked over the phone to do CPR until he realizes there's a knife there. There's blood around her. And he's kind of made an odd, crack at humor about not taking the knife out. And then when asked where it is, he says a very specific answer that it's right there in her heart. We will discuss this on the part 2 case when we kind of break it down with law enforcement. But to me, that sounds a little bit like we're leaking something on accident. Like, was this something that was in his head that he needed it to be in her heart. And I'm not trying to speculate. I mean, I guess I am speculating, guys, but here's the deal. Ultimately, this woman killed herself or she was murdered. And if she was murdered, then her boyfriend, fiance, the last person to have seen her alive, the person she lived with, would have some questions to answer. So whether he did it or not, or whether she did it or not, is exactly what is up for debate at this point to this day. And this happened in 2011. So, spoiler alert, Ellen's death was ruled a suicide. It is still currently ruled a suicide. So we've talked before, and while it's not the medical examiner's job to say that it was homicide, they can rule out certain things, right? They're supposed to tell you the manner in which someone died. We know she died from knife wounds. We know that her liver filled up with blood. We know that her right pleural space, her right lung filled up with blood, hundreds of milliliters of blood. Okay. So we know how she died, but at what cause? How did the knives get inside her body? Did she do this or did someone else? Now, with the information that they have, the medical examiners can rule out certain things by saying, this cannot be suicide. This is incompatible with a physical, it's physically impossible for someone to do this certain thing to themselves. Therefore, we as a medical examiner cannot say that it's homicide, but we can say they did not kill themselves, right? So you can do one of those. And so that's why I say not to necessarily have to implicate Sam here, but he would be the one that would be answering these hard questions. And it doesn't sound like a whole lot of questions were asked. Okay. So that's why we're going to be talking about all of this. So let's read through some timeline of events here. In the early morning hours of January 27th, so this has kind of happened, he called 911, first responders get there around 6:30 or so. We know also that uncle and cousin are there, so we're going to talk more on that in a moment. But we have the early morning hours of the 27th. Ellen is taken to the office of the medical examiner. So this is the medical investigator, Stephen Olszewski. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. And he stays on scene during this whole thing to make sure that the knife that is in her chest is not removed during the process of her getting transported to the medical examiner's office. So he goes with Ellen to the morgue. All right. So that's what happens first. Then we have January 27th, around 9 a.m. So now the morning has come and gone, or the nighttime has come and gone. It's 9 o'clock the next morning, and Dr. Marlon Osborne is who conducts the autopsy. So that autopsy is performed the following morning at 9 a.m. All right. So then we have later that day, we're not sure when, but later the day after her death, James Schwartzman, Uncle James, Sam's Uncle James, requests access to get into the apartment. And in doing this, he speaks with someone named Melissa Ware. Now, Melissa is the apartment manager at this time. And so she's contacted by Uncle James Schwartzman, who asks her for help to get into the apartment so that he can get a suit for Sam to wear to Ellen's funeral. So the apartment manager, Miss Ware, contacts the police to say, is that okay? She wants to get permission from them first. So good on her. She did the right thing there. They tell her that the crime scene has been released and he may enter. Y'all, this is the next day. This woman died the night before. This was not as clear cut as this was a for sure suicide. We're turning it over. We're releasing this area to family and to whomever may want to come in. This is the very next day. And so they say, yep, let's go on in. The crime scene's been released. You may enter. They also tell her that she can go on and call the crime scene cleanup to come clean up that apartment. We're moving really rapidly here, guys. Really, really rapidly with changing things up here. So we know that to be the fact. Let's see here. So then we also know that Melissa Ware, that property manager, right? She later tells the police department representative, we don't have the name of this police department representative there in Philadelphia, that he advised her to call a third-party service to the apartment and have it thoroughly cleaned. So that would be the crime scene cleanup that we just referenced, okay? It says that we have no evidence anywhere in the record of this case that Miss Ware, the unidentified cleaning service, or the PPD representative were ever interviewed by investigating authorities, meaning that this property manager, who has now been in contact with the police, been in contact with the uncle of the boyfriend of the met dead woman, right? She's been in contact with this cleaning crew company, in theory, and we don't have record that any of them have been talked to by police or in any kind of way interviewed or questioned. So that is good to know. So we also know that when this happens, Melissa Ware makes a video that records the state of the apartment prior to having it cleaned. Like, this woman's on it. She calls the police ahead of time to make sure, that it's even okay for the uncle to come in. And then when they tell her to go on and call for the cleaning company, she videos the apartment before it's cleaned. But guess what, guys? You know what's in that video? You know what it shows? We don't know, because it was given to the Philadelphia police and it is unaccounted for. So to this day, we don't have record of this video that she took that was wonderful documentation prior to what I would consider a very premature professional cleanup. All right. So we know that same day on the 27th, the crime scene cleanup cleans the apartment. Y'all, I wish that people would move this quickly when we really need them to, right? Because everything they want done is happening within moments. So this is, again, the day after Ellen died, the afternoon evening of January 26th. We are only on to January 27th. The uncle has entered the apartment and left. The crime scene has been cleaned up professionally. Okay. When Uncle James comes in to, quote, get a suit for Sam to wear to the funeral, we know that he actually took 2 cell phones, 3 laptops, and Ellen's purse. Okay. So now we have, on January 27th, that same day, that morning, the autopsy was conducted, if you remember, at 9:00 that morning. And we have the autopsy was complete. They deemed this a homicide. They, meaning Dr. Martin Osborne, deems this a homicide. And the autopsy showed that Ellen had been stabbed 20 times, 8 times in the chest, 10 times in the back of the neck, once in her abdomen, once across her scalp. I got a picture of this here. If you guys are not watching on YouTube, you can go to my Instagram on Andrea Up Late and see these pictures. But here's a rendering. We now have, this wasn't available at the time of Ellen's death, but we now have the 3D programming that can show these kinds of things. This is an illustration of where all the stab wounds occurred. You tell me if Ellen did this to herself. So we can see a large laceration on the scalp, and we see what equates to between 10 and 11 stab wounds to the back of the neck, and the bottom back of the head, and about the same amount to the chest wall, and down a little bit into the abdomen. All right. We know that a serrated knife was found still plunged into her chest. This would be the knife that Sam referenced on the 911 call that he seemed so surprised to see. It was actually 4 inches deep into her chest. The medical examiner did conclude that Ellen had been murdered and ruled this case a homicide. Okay. So now that it's been ruled a homicide, police want to go on and apply for a search warrant. What's already happened, y'all? We've already had it compromised. We've had James. The cousin was there as well. James was in and out, the uncle. He's already removed belongings. We've had the property manager in there videoing the place, and we've had a professional cleanup crew come. But now we have a search warrant. All right. So they come in there on January 28th at 10:51 a.m. So this is about a day and a half after Ellen's death, and the search warrant was executed. This is where the police seize assorted clothing, blood samples, a diamond ring, some Latin prints, a Rubbermaid container. But again, this is after it had been professionally cleaned. And then we have 2 days, or the next day on January 29th, the cell phones and the laptops are retrieved by police from James Schwartzman. So at some point they realize he has these belongings and they retrieve them back from him. Okay. So let's talk crime scene. We know we have that knife in the abdomen, okay? She was wearing a t-shirt, sweatpants, Ugg boots at the time of her death. She had a scrunchie around her wrist, and she had like a zip-up hoodie shirt on top. All of these things were stabbed through. None of her wounds came onto bare skin. They all came through her clothing. No luminol test was conducted, which would have been interesting to see the results of, because there really was very little blood considering the lacerations and the stab wounds that we have, over 20 of them. You guys have seen enough of this stuff to know that not only are this many stab wounds going to cause massive amounts of lost blood, but particularly anything to the head. Our scalp is extremely vascular. So, if you've got a child who falls and barely bumps their head and, the skin splits at all, it's going to bleed and look so much worse than it actually is. So to know that she has between 10 and 11 significant stab wounds plus that laceration in her scalp, there would be blood all over the place. And there's really not that much. But we have not had a luminol test performed or any of the other types of chemical tests that they can do for this to see if potentially the area had been cleaned up prior to arrival of EMS. All right. So we have, at some point, a neuropathologist was referred who wrote a report that one of the stab wounds to the back of Ellen's neck actually hit the spinal cord, which would have rendered her numb. Okay, guys, you hearing me? Rendered her numb, allowing her not to feel pain, therefore allowing her to continue to stab herself. Well, you guys, let's walk back on that one. If her spinal cord had been hit in a certain kind of way to render her numb, do you believe that she then would have had the strength to continue to grip this knife? It's not a very large knife. I'll show you the knife. I mean, it's big enough to do this damage, but in terms of her gripping this handle, it's an average size steak knife, y'all. So do you think that she would be able to continue to grip this? Oh, excuse me, that's the door. With her spinal cord tapped, right? Stabbed. Oh, I don't have it in here. I'll show it on my Instagram. But and have the strength and the force to penetrate her own body over and over again. But either way, that's what that neuropathologist said. Now, Sam told authorities that he found Ellen propped up against the kitchen cabinets like we talked about. But there was a blood stain that was dried that ran horizontally from her nostril, her right nostril, to her right ear. So if she was propped up, you guys know gravity. If nothing else, we have gravity in our favor, right? So if she was propped up against these cabinets, like he stated he found her, the blood would be running down her face, not, and he said that her, it came from her nose toward the direction of her ear, but her head was flopped forward on top of her chest. Now let's go back to where he told the 911 operator that she was in fact lying flat on her back. Maybe he moved her. In fact, I'm quite sure that she was moved, but either way, maybe he moved her, let's say, innocently and trying to fix things and help things, then he could just say that. Also, you're not necessarily going to find someone lying flat on their back with a knife in their chest, potentially attempt CPR, stop that, and then sit them up against a cabinet when they're unresponsive. And EMS was only there 4 minutes later. Okay. So fun little side note to keep in mind. Sam told the police that the security guard was present when he broke the apartment door down. But this guard said he never actually even left his post in the lobby. And they don't have any surveillance footage throughout the apartment to show that the security guard was with him when this happened. We also don't have security. We don't have camera footage on Sam and Ellen's apartment door, unfortunately, because Sam states that he kicked this door in. This is another piece I want to add to the puzzle that I'll put a picture of on my Instagram page. But this door frame does not look kicked in. This doesn't look like this bolted slide bar is, like the screws are loose. The door frame's not cracked. Like nothing indicates that it was kicked in. And in fact, people like to say that these slide bars are impenetrable from the outside or you cannot open the door. That's not true. Go to YouTube, go to Google. I did it myself. You can look up plenty of ways. You can use 3 or 4 household tools, a credit card, to go from the outside to unlock that door. So the idea that she killed herself, she had locked the door, no one else could have possibly done this, and then gotten out and the door be locked. that at least is completely unfounded. It could be for sure. So let's talk real quick about the call timelines, because we know what time Sam called 911, but what happened in the moments prior? Okay. So at 6:14 that evening, do you remember he went to the gym? He came back home at 5:30. Ellen's not answering the door. He's getting irritated. He's calling her and he's texting her. At 6:14 p.m., he calls his cousin Kamian Schwartzman. Remember the one who just so happened to arrive right before 911 got there? Then at 6:26, 12 minutes later, Sam gets a call from Uncle James. Uncle James that we continue to reference, that came in the apartment and took belongings, right? Before it was cleaned up. So he calls his cousin, and then either something he says to his cousin or what, his uncle then calls him. And then we have at 6:31, Sam calling 911. Okay, so he calls his cousin, and then his uncle calls him, and then he calls 911. So he's making some quick phone calls before. Now, who is James Schwartzman? Who is this Uncle James that we keep referencing? Let's talk a little bit about him. James C. Schwartzman is actually a former prosecutor. At this time, he was vice chairman of the board of directors of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, SEPTA. Okay. He was described as politically important in the city of Philadelphia at this time and in like the decade prior. He also became then the president judge of the Pennsylvania Court of Judicial Discipline. So he has a hand in what happens to certain judges depending on certain cases. This is good to know, you guys. All right. So we're still weaving more of a web here. So about a month later, remember Dr. Martin Osborne, he's who conducted the autopsy and ruled it initially a homicide, no question. He then amends Ellen's death certificate. So what happened is the Greenbergs, Ellen's parents, actually, they take their attorney and a private detective, some evidence that they've collected we'll talk about, and they say that all of this changed after a meeting among police, one prosecutor, and two medical examiner officials that handled the Greenberg case. So a month after her death, it's quote called a secret meeting. Depending on most sources you read, call it a secret meeting because there's very little evidence of this, but there is evidence that this meeting took place. And the ME officials actually gave deposition that they attended this meeting. And after this meeting took place, then Martin Osborne officially changed the manner of death to suicide. And it has been ruled a suicide ever since. Okay. We know that there's been talk, some whispers of Ellen suffering from some anxiety in the months prior to her death. So let's talk about that in the vein that this could have been suicide. She did have some anxiety. She was not known to have any kind of crippling depression or anything like that. She had some behavioral changes, but the teachers that she worked with all say that she was bubbly, happy, that the only anxiety they knew of was mainly just concerning a couple of like problem students she had. She had recently received a prescription of Klonopin. However, when her therapist was questioned, her therapist there were no red flags. There was nothing to indicate that Ellen was suicidal whatsoever. Not that a spontaneous suicide can't take place, but there was no pattern of behavior that showed that she was spiraling in that kind of way. All right. So we know that on the hard drive of Ellen's laptop, which at some point was taken from James and given to police, it was not password protected. Keep that in mind, okay? And investigators did find Google searches for painless suicide and, quote, quick suicide. I will tell you that if you are searching quick suicide, stabbing yourself 20 times is not going to be probably in the results list that you find. But that was found on the hard drive of her computer. So they're kind of going off of all of this information as well. But Ellen's parents did not believe this. They went on to open their own investigation. They hired an attorney named Joe Pedraza. So Then Joe Pedraza immediately, one of the first thing he does is contact that neuropathologist that was listed on the report, the one who stated, if you remember, that in one of these cuts or stabbings to the back of the neck, that Ellen had severed that, or had, nicked the spinal cord, rendering her numb, remember, so that she could continue to stab herself without pain. So the parents' new attorney, Pedraza, calls this neuropathologist. She immediately says that she has no memory of ever even working on Ellen's case. In fact, she claimed that she was working at a children's hospital at the time, and that whoever had written her name on that pathology report had misspelled it and had erroneously written her name, had forged her signature. She said she never worked on this case at all. So someone did, though, and someone put her name on it. So Ellen's parents then hired their own forensic pathologist, who determined that the stab wound in question, the one that this fake report had been made about, actually had penetrated Ellen's cranial cavity, which would have then resulted in severe pain. She would have been in and out of consciousness at the very least, and definitely would have prohibited herself from stabbing herself 20 times. Okay. Some people will talk and they get hung up on the fact that Sam was wearing like Timberland work boots when he said he was going to the gym. I will say, to me, I don't care. You can wear work boots to the gym. Some people go barefoot. If you're just going to go, especially if he lives there and he's just bopping down for a few minutes, if he's doing shoulders or something like that. No one said that he was running on the treadmill. Either way, in 2017, there was a new investigative analysis, and it showed evidence of severe bruising all over Ellen's body. But let me tell you where this matters, because these bruises were healing at different rates, meaning she had received these bruises at different times, different days. Okay, so they're all in various forms of healing. So then we need to look at what that might look like. She even had what they considered to be a fingernail mark and a bruise on her neck, potentially indicating manual strangulation. The cause of death in this analysis that from the new forensic or criminal investigative analysis in 2017 states that it should be listed as a homicide, although her death is still listed as a suicide. So we will look real quickly at what those bruises looked like. She had multiple bruises. She had one on her upper arm that was 3 by 4 centimeters. She had one that was on her right forearm that was a cluster of 3 round bruises that were all around 3 by 1.5 centimeters. All right. 3 by 1.5 centimeters. That would be consistent with fingers. She had a 3 by 3.5 centimeter bruise on her lower right quadrant of her abdomen. She had a vertical row of round bruises, and they were sized 2.5 by 3 centimeters, 4.5 by 3 centimeters, and 5 by 6 centimeters, and these were all on her abdomen. She had an area of 3 more round bruises above her right knee that were all around 4.5 by 3 centimeters. Or the area was that size that had the 3 round bruises, very similar to the ones that were found on her arm that could be indicative of fingerprints or finger bruises. When I say that they're in various stages of healing, because then that can point toward potential domestic violence. I will say that his text toward Ellen, when he starts almost threatening, when he says things like, "You have no idea, and you better have an excuse for why she wasn't opening the door," these are red flags to me. I don't like the way these things sound. This is not what it sounds like when you are concerned about your partner who's not answering the door, or even if you're irritated. This is much more of a threatening tone to me. So then we have 10 years after her death, in February of 2021, it was revealed actually that Ellen had never made any Google searches about suicide after all. You guys, this was looked at and weighed heavily in this in theory, in the ruling of the manner of her death. She actually had searched for Klonopin's effect on weight gain soon after she got the prescription. And when she did that, it showed those, the related like AKA questions, like all those like auto-populated questions that pop up that other people have inputted into Google. When she searched for the Klonopin weight gain effect, she gets all these phantom searches of suicide, because people who were looking up Klonopin and side effects potentially were also looking up manners of suicide. So Ellen never typed that in. She never researched quick suicide or, how to do this. In 2020, Ellen's parents filed a lawsuit against Philadelphia medical examiner Sam Gulino in order to have her official cause of death removed from her case file. We will talk about this on part 2, but that's actually something you can do. Sam Gulino was recently actually placed on leave pending an investigation regarding the mishandling of victim remains from the 1985 MOVE bombing. We have... Let's see here. I had some newer evidence, but we do know that, Ellen's parents are continuing to try and change this, try and figure out what's going on, or try to get her death ruled a homicide. They know for sure now that this is not what they consider a suicide, but we know that that about the internet search was very interesting, and that was a very new development. We also know that this past September, meaning last month, September 14th of 2023, there was a ruling that concluded, because the family did sue and hope to change the manner of death there on her death certificate so that they could actually open an investigation and investigate this homicide, but they were shut down and the ruling stayed, keeping her original cause of death as a suicide. So her parents have planned to appeal that decision to the state Supreme Court. Her death is also being reviewed by the Chester County District Attorney's Office, and the family is pursuing actually a separate civil lawsuit that alleges a cover-up over her death. Think about it, you guys. I'll be in the chats tonight, kind of conversing with you. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this. And this will drop wherever you listen to your podcast, wherever you stream, okay? You guys, it doesn't cost a dime to subscribe. So if you do me a favor and just hit that little button, it would really help me out as I try to grow this channel after moving away from a different channel. That would be awesome. Yeah, let me know what you think. We'll throw a post up on Instagram tomorrow about this. And again, next week we'll have part 2, where it's not me just reading like the Micro Machine Man as quickly as possible, all my notes to get through this pretty interesting case and detailed case. I don't want any of those details to get lost, and we're going to talk about them more in depth next week and actually decide if we think this does look more or less like a suicide or a murder. Either way, until then, I hope y'all have a great week, and I will see y'all next Tuesday.